Welcome to Turning Moments into Movements, where each week we explore simple but powerful wellbeing tips to help you live a balanced and fulfilling life. My name's Leanne Ross, your host and the founder and coach of my business, Happyluya, and I will be taking you through today's 15 minutes of insight and inspiration. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. Last week we covered all about how to identify your triggers. So I wanted to do a part 2 of that because I understand that it will absolutely have brought things up for people, and some people want to immediately start to unpick their triggers and what actually happened and how to best manage it. So this episode will be focusing on the 5 ways to manage your triggers. So let's just dive straight in. So the first one is to really focus on identifying that trigger. We have to have a bit of an understanding around what our trigger is before we start to sort of put in coping strategies around managing it. So if you've not listened to last week's episode around how to identify, track and familiarise yourself with your triggers, I would really encourage you to go back and listen to that before you carry on with this episode, because it's a real key part of managing your triggers. We have to know what we've actually been triggered by. And I'm not going to actually pay too much more attention to that because I've done a whole episode on it. So for the purposes of today, if you've not listened to that episode, go back and listen so you can start to have a bit of an understanding around how to identify the triggers that we are going to be exploring a little bit more in this episode. The second one is to explore your triggers with a safe space. With a safe person in a safe space. And there's lots of ways that we can do this. We can hire a coach, therapist, counsellor. We can speak to a trusted person. Now, I did touch on this in the last episode, that it's really important to speak to someone about identifying your triggers so they can help you to do that. But for the purposes of this part, we're going to be focusing on managing the triggers. Sometimes we don't have all the answers, and that's why I'm a coach. That's why I have a coach. It's really important that we have safe people that we can explore these vulnerable situations with. We need that insight, and I'm going to say expert insight for 2 reasons. The first one, from a professional stance, is having that expert insight is going to be really powerful because you're going to be speaking to people who have so much knowledge, so much understanding around how to support you to manage your triggers in a way that feels right for you. The second person who is going to be that expert is someone who simply knows you really well. So it could be a parent, a friend, a partner, whoever that is. They know you so well, so they can maybe provide you that specific support that's going to be personalised to you because they know you. They probably are going to have some sort of insight around what will work, what hasn't worked, what may have worked in the past. And to give you that space is going to be really, really helpful. The third step is I'm actually going to add a little bit. I've just had a bit of a brainwave. When we are exploring our triggers and understanding how to manage them, one part that is really helpful when we're talking to people is also talk to yourself. So really engage in that self-talk. Give yourself that reassurance. Give yourself that thinking prompts. So after you've maybe had that conversation with that safe person, reiterate that conversation with yourself and say things like, it's okay that I've been triggered. I am going to manage this in my own way, and I have the power and the knowledge to tap into these skill sets to ensure that I do feel like I'm managing my triggers in a way that feels right for me. So something that I would really encourage you to do, really engage in that self-compassion, because that is going to calm yourself down. Compassion naturally helps to self-soothe. And if we've been triggered, we're going to be really high. We're going to be sitting maybe at a level like 9 or 10 out of 10. So if we show ourselves that self-compassion, we're going to naturally bring that triggers, that anxiety, that anger, that worry, that upset down. So engaging in positive and nurturing self-talk is another really key way to support yourself. I might actually just add that as a second point. So that will be the third one. So really practicing self-compassion can really help to reduce that shame and guilt that we have when we're triggered. Being triggered can be really vulnerable, provoking. It can make us feel unsafe. It can make us feel a bit embarrassed that we've suddenly lost control of it. So giving yourself that self-compassion is going to be really key to managing your triggers as effectively as possible. The fourth step is going to be about planning ahead. So if you've identified most of your triggers, or at least some of them, you can then start to plan ahead and anticipate when you may be triggered next. So it could be that every single time you pass an area, you maybe have to drive to work, and you have to pass this specific shop every single day, and something happened in the shop that makes you triggered. Could be that someone was really rude to you, you were having a bad day as it is, and you left that shop just feeling so low. And just seeing that shop brings everything back. So planning ahead can be really helpful, because it can help us to not only prepare for our triggers, but it can also help us to avoid them as well. So for that specific scenario, is it a case of you actually just go a different route and you just avoid that shop? Is it a case of when you're passing the shop, if you can't avoid it, or if you don't want to avoid it and you want to overcome this trigger, you purposefully choose to put on like your favourite song when you're passing that shop? Or it could be that when you're passing that shop, you talk out loud to yourself and you're like, I am so worthy. I am so deserving of having an amazing day. That person didn't know what they were talking about. They had absolutely no right in speaking to me like that. So therefore, I'm moving forward with this. You will probably feel really silly doing that. I promise you it's gonna work. It taps into, step 3 around having that self-compassion. So really, really important step to really plan ahead, because that can take some of the ambiguity out of the situation if we're planning for a situation that's going to be specifically challenging. Another example could be, for example, say you hate public speaking and on Monday morning, you have to do this presentation at work. How can you just make things a little bit easier for yourself? So I'm not as bad now, but before I used to really struggle with public speaking. So I used to do a bit of prep beforehand. So I would have a piece of paper with just bullet points of things that I really wanted to make sure that I covered. I also would reduce my caffeine intake, because that would feel like it was almost aggravating my anxiety. I also had something in my pocket. It was always a crystal. I would always have a crystal in my pocket that I could just hold, and it almost just helped me to distract myself a little bit. So using those techniques were really helpful, because I was walking into that meeting or presentation not feeling as jittery because I hadn't downed a million coffees beforehand, having something in my hand to just focus on and almost channel that anxiety into. And then also knowing that even if I just lost my train of thought, if I was like if anxiety took over, I literally had that piece of paper that told me the 5 points I had to cover in that presentation. And that really helped for me to plan ahead and to really support my triggers as much as possible. And ironically, doing those really helped me to move forward. And now, I wouldn't say I'm a total expert at public speaking, but I feel so much more confident doing so because I've done so much prep. It's something that comes second nature to me now. So really good tips and tricks in there. The fifth one, and I guess I've actually started to cover it already, is identifying coping strategies that you feel are going to be helpful for you in those moments. So like I said, it could be having something in your hand to just kind of distract yourself with. It could be, just going back to that, when we're anxious and when we're triggered and feeling maybe quite irritable, quite often we'll fidget. That's a really kind of noticeable sign if someone's been triggered. They might be, fidgeting, they might play with their hair. I play with my hair all the time. So it could be, someone like clicking on a pen. It could be a number of different things. So having something that's subtle that allows you to still fidget, but is something that's quite discreet, is probably going to really help you to manage those times when you've been triggered. Other examples I've got are to take 3 deep breaths. This is something that you can do very subtly. This is something that's really quick. You can do it during your presentation. You can just take a pause, take a big deep breath, and no one will notice. Another thing could be that you might say, actually, I just need to run and get my notepad. Run out of the room, take 3 deep breaths, grab your notebook, and then go back in. So there's lots of different ways that you can do that. Similarly, and I really wanted to have this point within this episode. If you feel so triggered that you can't manage it, you absolutely have the permission to leave. I know there will be circumstances where, that won't be appropriate for whatever reason, but generally speaking, if you feel so triggered that you're not able to focus, you're not able to function, and you are just feeling so overwhelmed, remove yourself from that environment. There's been times where many years ago when I was in a really dark place, I would go out with my friends drinking, and I was just triggered all the time because I just wasn't in a good place. So literally anything and everything was triggering me. I just didn't feel safe at all. And what I found was I forced myself to stay there. And sometimes that's okay to kind of really push yourself to push through that trigger. Other times it's not. Other times it's more of detriment. Like, was it really necessary for me to force myself to go out time and time again, drink lots of alcohol in a really stimulating environment where, to be frank, I just didn't want to be there? So sometimes it is okay just to leave, just to avoid doing something. And obviously there's a bit of a slippery slope there. We don't want to be at a point where we're just completely avoiding doing everything and we're leaving constantly as soon as we feel triggered, because that is also going to be detrimental. But giving yourself permission that if things get so hard, it's okay to just leave. I think that's really powerful. That once again, that taps into that self-compassion. Just giving yourself permission. If this is what I need, then fine. And having an exit strategy is really, really good. There's been times where I've left meetings or something like that, in the middle of a meeting because I felt so overwhelmed. You can say, actually, sorry, I need to actually pop out. Or you can just say, I actually need to nip to the toilet or whatever. It's okay to take that moment, to take that breath. For me, it's an absolute strength being able to do that and having the courage to do that. So if that's going to be some of your coping strategies, then go for it. I probably will do another future episode on coping strategies because it's such a huge subject. So yeah, I will be sure actually to do that. I'll probably do that super soon actually, so watch out for that. So to recap, looking at your 5 ways to manage your triggers. The first one is to identify your trigger. So as I've said, make sure you go back and listen to that specific episode on identifying, tracking and familiarising yourself with triggers. The second one would be to explore your triggers with a safe person in a safe space. The third one would be to practice self-compassion, positive self-talk, offering yourself reassurance, rational thinking, all of that good stuff. The fourth one would be to plan ahead. And the fifth one would be to identify some coping strategies that are really going to help you to manage your triggers effectively. And as I say, I will be doing a future episode on that super soon. But anyway, as always, reach out to me. You can get me on all social media platforms. You can get me through my website. I have a direct link there to set up a call. So yeah, reach out if you have any questions. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Turning Moments into Movements. Why not check out coaching opportunities with me so you can really begin to enhance your moments into huge movements and begin to live the life you never thought possible? Details are in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, leave a review and share this episode. Remember to also follow me on social media platforms through my handle Happyluia, where you will receive additional daily content. And finally, make sure you join us next week for more tips on how you can turn your small moments into life-changing movements.